It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome to Rico Brogna, the New York Mets podcast. I think many of you have listened to Rico Brogna. This is going to be one of those rare times where I open a Rico Brogna by reminding anybody, whether you're a first-time downloader, whether you've been listening for months or weeks, I love Rico Brogna. I am not Rico Brogna. My name is Evan Roberts. I work on WFAN. I'm a diehard Mets fan. But Rico Brogna is a baseball player who I loved as a kid. I loved watching his defense. I fell in love with him when he was on fire in St. Louis back in 1995. So this podcast, a Met podcast, is named in honor of Rico Brogna. I say that as a public service because over the last few months, we've received emails to the Rico Brogna in which people think I am Rico Brogna. Hey, Rico, big fan. Used to wear 26 for you. So I do want to make clear, while we love Rico Brogna, and Rico has appeared on the Rico Brogna, I'm not Rico Brogna. I'm Evan Roberts. Pete Hoffman does a wonderful job producing and co-hosting, but neither of us are Rico Brogna. So I just wanted to make that clear before we begin this brand spanking new edition of Rico Brogna. Now, we've had well over 400 episodes. And recently, during the holiday season, we posted a very special three-part series in which we counted down the greatest home runs in the history of the New York Mets. If you haven't had a chance to listen or download, I certainly recommend that you do. Because today on the Rico Brogna, we are hearing from you. There were many listeners who had positive things to say about the list, and many listeners who had negative things to say about the list, angry about some of the omissions from the top 20 list. I do want to remind you that the reason we put this together and the reason we had fun doing this is because 2024 featured some of the great home runs in the history of the New York Mets. And I thought before we place where the Pete Alonso home run should be and where either of the Francisco Lindor home runs should be, it would be good, it would be fun, it would be educational to look back at some of the greatest home runs in the history of the New York Mets. One thing I made very clear during our honorable mention edition, and I should say it again, in case maybe you only listened to one part, you kind of jumped in and listened to just a little bit of it. We excluded the 9/11 Mike Piazza home run, not because it wasn't amazing, not because it wasn't iconic, but because I almost thought it was unfair. Because that home run was so much more than baseball, so much more than a pennant race or winning a world championship or winning a division series. It was about us. It was us about a country as a city, and it was that moment where Mike Piazza did something that distracted us from the real world. So this list has been every home run besides that one. I almost look at Mount Rushmore as something we always refer to. The Mike Piazza post 9/11 home run is its own mountain. That's on its absolute own. But when thinking of all these other home runs, they're all baseball related, and we're all arguing about the importance of what it led to. So the Piazza 9/11 home run, which we did play, if you missed it during the honorable mention edition, is on its own cliff. It's on its own mountain, if you will. The other thing I want to make clear is the honorable mention edition was never home runs that necessarily just missed the list. They were home runs that were either really special to me, home runs that I thought were historic but underrated in Met history, such as the first home run ever hit. It was pretty cool. We actually played that on the honorable mention edition, where Gil Hodges hit the first home run in the history of the New York Mets, or the first home run in the history of the postseason. So those home runs, like, for example, Marlon Anderson hitting an inside the park home run, I didn't include that because it just missed. Like, it would have been 22. I included it because it was kind of cool. So I don't want anyone to take the honorable mentions as, well, you didn't include a World Series home run, but you included Marlon Anderson. What the hell is wrong with you? That was more for fun. But in terms of the list, yeah, I ranked them 1 through 20. And a lot of people out there had some disagreements. So this edition of the Rico Brogna is about you. We heard a lot of your critiques, a lot of your, hey, how did you omit this? And so what Pete and I did, is we got some of those calls. So for those who complained and for those who said, how did you not include this home run? For a lot of them, I'm not just going to describe it. I'm not just going to read your email. We will listen to said home run. But let me start things off with an email that we received from Colin that I thought was below the belt. I did. I thought it was wrong. Now, for those that did not hear the complete list, I would tell you that Robin Ventura's grand slam single finished in number 2. And I know that many were thinking, where are you going to include the grand slam single when it's technically not a home run because he never rounded the bases? It's technically a single. So I had a feeling somebody would be a jackass. Somebody would use my kryptonite against me. Colin, it was you. Colin writes, "Sup, guys? First time, long time here. Love the pod. As a baseball pod junkie, it's one of my favorites." Oh, we're off to a great start. So, as a longtime Johan Santana no-hitter denier myself, I'm just making sure you guys are with me on that. Seeing as you consider Ventura's grand slam single is really a home run, despite not officially being scored as such. As you said, Evan, you know what you saw. The ball cleared the wall. And we all know what we saw. Carlos Beltran hit a double down the left field line. Thanks, guys. Colin. Hoff, I think that was dirty. And I kind of wonder if you put him up to it. Because obviously the Johan Santana no-hitter is very near and dear to my heart. I have fought with many, many people. I have a whole chapter about it in my Mets Bible in which I'm yelling angrily at people who tell me it's not a no-hitter. And that guy used our ranking of Robin Ventura and me calling it a home run against me. That was wrong, and that hurts.
It was a dirty play, I won't lie, but no, I would never do that. But I will say this much. Two things can both be true. The fact is that was a home run, and the fact is the Johan Santana was a no-hitter. Both things can be true. I don't care what Colin has to say.
Yeah, I'm not a hypocrite because keep this in mind. Robin Ventura hit a ball over the fence. That is not a judgment call. It's not like the umpire missaw it. It was a home run. And just because for clerical purposes, because think about it, it's a clerical thing. You could argue, hey, the ball goes over the fence. Why do you need to touch all the bases, right? It's a clerical thing. In Johan Santana's case, it was a judgment call. And the umpire made, yes, an incorrect call, but they made a call that was deemed, hey, that's foul. So, Colin, first of all, thank you for downloading. Thank you for being a loyal Rico Brogna listener, but screw you. Yeah, that's how I'll end that little email exchange. Screw you. Johan pitched a no-hitter, and Ventura hit a grand slam. All right, let's get to Lance. Lance writes, I have some notes on your list. Benny Agbayani, his home run, which, by the way, I had finishing number 10 on the list, should be higher than Daniel Murphy's home run. Murphy's home run finished at 7. That was, of course, in Game 5 of the NLDS. All I remember from that Game 3 is Agbayani's home run. When I think of that Game 5, I think of a DeGrom somehow working out of a bases-loaded jam in what seemed like every inning before Daniel Murphy. Let me respond to that, and we'll go piece by piece. I get it. Look, those are 2 home runs that were both in my top 10. So obviously, they're both magical. They're both iconic. You're right. You are 100% right. Like, off the top of my head, without going back to a scorecard, my memory of the Agbayani game is Benny Agbayani. I mean, it's literally, he hit a home run against the left-hander named Aaron Fultz. I remember that. There, to me, aren't a lot of things that jump out at you about that game. But I think your point is the game. Game 5 against the Dodgers had more memorable things than that game, Game 3 against San Francisco. That doesn't make the home run any less important. You know what I mean? Yes, Game 5 Mets-Dodgers, and maybe we should do this podcast down the road, is up there as one of the greatest games I've ever seen. And that would be a fun countdown list, like the greatest games in the history of the New York Mets. I'm not sure what could beat Game 6 against Houston and Game 6 against the Red Sox in 1986. But, hey, maybe some games will give it a run for its money. And so you're right. Game 5 against the Dodgers in 15 is a more memorable game than game 3, 2000 against San Francisco. But to me, that doesn't shortchange the importance of Daniel Murphy's home run. But I understand it. I had them close together. I had Agbayani at 10. I had Murphy at 7. He also goes on to write, if you're going to put Piazza's home run off Billy Wagner as honorable mention, I'd also put the one he hit against Trevor Hoffman. Absolutely fair. That was the following year in 1999 when the Mets had a lot of great wins. I was in the building for that game. It was really cool. Went opposite field against Hoffman. And, beating Trevor Hoffman feels unreal, unless it's October. Then it's like an every year occurrence. But during the regular season, Trevor Hoffman was every bit as good as Mariano Rivera. I think that's very memorable. And that's why honorable mention is kind of a tough thing to argue, because I included things that were very special and very unique. What to me made the Piazza versus Wagner home run a little bit more special was the fact that Piazza was still trying to prove himself as a Met. And that to me was one of his first I'm a Met kind of moments. Now, look, it happened in a year in which they didn't make the playoffs. So if you're looking for the end result, obviously 1999 had a better end result. They eventually made the playoffs, and every game mattered. They needed to play a game 163. In 1998, they choked like dogs down the stretch. Lance also goes on to write, Sean Dunstan's at-bat is amazing, but Todd Pratt deserves more credit for drawing a walk ahead of Robin Ventura, because I'm sure he wanted to swing at every one of those balls a foot out of the zone. I was terrified he was going to ground into a double play and not let Ventura get up with his 400-plus average with the bases loaded. Yeah, believe it or not, it's funny, and this is after I did the countdown list. This was probably in the last 48 hours, because sometimes I go to sleep with YouTube on, and I put the most random things on. And I put on that inning, that 15th inning between the Mets and the Braves in 1999, because I wanted, first of all, I think it popped up in my algorithm. So it wasn't necessarily something I was searching for. And I'm like, that would be kind of cool to watch, the Dunston at-bat. I was trying to remember what happened after that, like the whole sequence. And then watching it, I was able to see exactly what happened. They got the Dunston at-bat, which was a base hit. They got a walk. And then Edgardo Alfonso bunted with first and second, nobody out. And it reminded me that happened. But as I'm watching it, I'm like, oh, my God, in 2024, we lose our minds. In 2025, we'd lose our minds. Like, we would be cool with first and second, nobody out. John Olerud is clearly going to be intentionally walked next. Todd Pratt's up after that. We know what's going to happen. Edgardo Alfonso, one of their best hitters, is giving himself up. They're going to take the bat out of Olerud's hand. And to your point, Lance, Todd Pratt's going to come up, and he could bounce into a double play. But the Dunston at bat gets the credit because it started everything. The Mets are down by a run. He has a 12-pitch at-bat. I went back and watched this. Like I said, 12 pitches, including fouling off 6 in a row. 6 in a row. And then finally hits that ball up the middle that I can still envision at that rain-soaked Shea Stadium, seeing that ball come off the bat, and Dunston gets that single. Your point about Todd Pratt is absolutely fair. Todd Pratt was not exactly a patient hitter, and Kevin McGlinchey was a little bit wild. And, sometimes, especially in the old days when you actually had to intentionally walk somebody, you didn't stick up the 4 fingers, like you had to throw 4 balls out of the zone. Sometimes that could create wildness. And Todd Pratt did a very good job of being relatively patient, walking in the tying run, and then setting up Robin Ventura to hit the grand slam single. Lance ends his email on this note. He would put the Pete Alonso home run borderline top 5, but no way ahead of Robin Ventura's grand slam single. The Lindor grand slam borderline top 10, and the Lindor game 161 in the top 20. So where I would disagree with Lance is I put the Lindor 161 ahead of the Lindor grand slam. That's just me. Now, you're ready to hear me taken apart by a young man named Yanni. Yanni, if you're listening, excellent work, because Yanni did extensive research to not just bitch about me not including home runs, but specifically telling me which ones were missed. and he did some incredible research. So buckle up for this wonderful email by a 29-year-old man by the name of Yanni. Yanni writes, "Hi, Evan. I was excited to watch your home run ranking unveiling, as I trust your opinion and enjoy your ability to cogently. Sorry, we do the Rico sometimes late at night. I get confused. Cogently synthesize and deliver your thoughts to your listeners." Oh, that was some vocabulary. However, I must say I left somewhat disappointed. I'm 29 years old and consider myself a Mets and baseball historian. However, my ability to recall specifics of history before my time is clearly more difficult the further back we go. I was hoping for more coverage of the 1960s and 1970s home runs. After all, the Mets won more pennants between 1969 and 1973 than any other 5-year stretch in team history, and won more playoff series in that time than any other Mets team, save 99-2000, when they also won 3 series. Furthermore, regular season home runs mattered more when fewer teams made the postseason. To be fair, you mentioned there weren't a lot of important home runs, but I found that hard to believe that in all of the 1960s and 70s, with the Miracle Mets and the 73 You Gotta Believe Mets, whose turnaround came even later, there was only one home run worthy of a top 20 spot when there are 3 home runs on the list that come from seasons when the Mets didn't even win a single postseason series or make the postseason in 2 of those cases. After finishing your 3-part series, I subscribed to BR Stathead to do my own research. Look at this guy. I like this. Even though he vehemently disagrees with me, I like this. I'm not claiming that CWPA and CLI are the end-all be-all barometers for ranking pivotal home runs. We can't reduce the gravity of moments or performances to a single definitive stat. However, they are a fantastic starting point for becoming aware of individual plays, and you're able to filter by team and team event. So I did just that. By the way, let me explain. CWPA, I'm not familiar with CLI, but CWPA is the win probability that's added by the home run that you hit. The C, get ready for this off, is the championship win probability. So, for example, if a guy hits a home run, and I think we've all heard of this, what does this do to the win probability of the game? Like if they had a 35% chance of winning before the home run, and now the home run is hit, and they have a 55% chance of winning, you obviously see the increase of plus 25. But the C is actually winning a whole championship. So if you hit a big home run in September and you're 35 games out of first place, it's not adding to your CWPA. So that's the stat he looked at. And I'm going to give you the list. And I think some of these are really, really good. And some of these I just disagree with. Not that they shouldn't have been honorable mentions, because like I said, honorable mentions, a lot of it was personal. A lot of it was, hey, this was the first home run in the history of the Mets. Obviously, honorable mentions can be anything. So a few of these, I will say, hey, totally fine as an honorable mention. I'm sorry, I disagree, not in the top 20. But I do appreciate the research. So let's go through what Yanni was able to come up with. Number 1, and this is a good one. And I'll paint the situation for you. 1986 World Series, Game 4. Mets are down 2-1, and Gary Carter comes to the plate. Take a listen, and you'll hear what Gary Carter does.
Fastball. High drive into left field. Rice is looking up. She is gone. Home run, Carter. Now that's the art of hitting. He says to himself, the pitcher struck me out on a curve. Is he going to come back with the curve? And Nipper thinks he's probably looking curve. I'll give him a fastball. Well, that could be.
So that's the home run that Gary hit 2 in Game 4 of the World Series. But I think the first one is the one that certainly has a chance to be on this list. That's a 2-run home run that gives the Mets a 2-0 lead in the top of the 4th inning. They go on and they win that game, Game 4. by a final score of 6-2. They end up scoring 3 runs in the 4th inning, 2 runs in the 7th inning. Gary Carter, it's a home run late, his second home run of the game. So they build this 6-0 lead. They give up 2 runs in the bottom of the 8th. They win 6-2. So pure context on this, World Series home run, down 2-1 in the series, a 2-run home run in the top of the 4th inning to give you a lead. Where do I put this? Like, I agree, that's better than honorable mention. Where does that fight into the top 10? Honestly, I don't think it makes the top 10. Am I putting that ahead of Ray Knight's winner in Game 7? No. Am I putting that ahead of Robin Ventura's grand slam single to walk off and win a game? No. I'm not putting that ahead of Al Weiss hitting what turned out to be a game-tying home run in a World Series clinching game. I'm not putting it ahead of Lenny Dykstra hitting a walk-off in the NLCS, or Todd Pratt hitting a walk-off, or Darryl hitting an insurance home run in Game 7 of the World Series, or Daniel Murphy breaking a tie in the midst of a winner-take-all Game 5, or Darryl hitting a huge 3-run home run in the NLCS that kind of helped turn that series around, or Lenny Dykstra hitting a leadoff home run 1 game earlier than Gary, or Benny hitting a walk-off. I think where I would consider it is kind of in that 11 to 15 range. It is a World Series home run. It is pivotal. I'm certainly not dismissing it. But to me, and I give you the full context just so we know, not just what CWPA says, and he agrees, 0-0 game, you're down 2-1 in the World Series, 2-run home run to put you up 2-0. It's big. And a fair critique as an omission. So that's number 1. Number 2, let's go to Game 4 of the 1973 World Series. And this is a good one because I did try to find home runs in that kind of run that they went on in 1973 to say, is there anything that fits here? So we've got Game 4, World Series, 1973. Met legend Rusty Staub comes to the plate, and here's the way it sounded.
Rusty Staub has had 3 hits and 11 times hit back. And this is first World Series. Hits it in the air, way back in left. It's sending Rudy back to the wall, and it is gone. A home run for Rusty Staub. Rusty Staub, who had 15 home runs during the regular season, and he had 3 home runs during the playoffs, has just hit his first World Series homer, a 3-runner.
By the way, don't you love 3-runner? We mentioned this when you hear some of the older home runs, like you hear some phrases that you don't hear anymore. I'd love for Gary Cohen to kind of use that in the midst of the season this year. Francisco Lindor with a 3-runner. So this home run is actually very similar to the Gary Carter home run. It's Game 4, and they're down 2-1. So from that standpoint, the World Series is similar. The only difference is Rusty hits this home run in the first inning to give them a lead. And it is the same thing in that he gives them an early 3-0 lead and they never turn back. So I think that is kind of very similar to Gary Carter. Rusty hitting a 3-run home run to start the game, set the tone for Game 4. And obviously the Mets go on and win that game and then win Game 5. They actually took a 3-2 lead before they went back to Oakland, couldn't hit, and they lost Game 6 and 7. I think the difference and why I would put Carter ahead of Staub, but kind of in that same range, I think you could argue that 11 to 17 range, is that they didn't win the series. Now, that's not the end-all be-all. As Yanni points out, I've included home runs in games they've lost. Not a lot, just really that Piazza one against John Smoltz. This is a series they lost. So while it was a big home run, and it certainly helped change things in that World Series and set the tone in that Game 4, ultimately, what did it lead to? So, good one, though. And that's why I'm reading all this, because I thought Yanni did a really, really good job. Number 3, and I considered this one, Don Clendenin in Game 5 of the 1969 World Series. We've already included Al Weiss. Al Weiss's home run was the game-tying home run, but the Mets were losing in this game to Baltimore 3-0. Their rally didn't start with Al Weiss. It actually started with this home run. by Don Clendenin in Game 5 of the 1969 World Series.
Way back in left field. Buford goes to the wall. It's going gone for a home run for Clendenin. Clendenin's third home run in this World Series. It is Baltimore 3 and the Mets 2.
Not bad. No, I think, again, that's probably in the latter part of the top 20. It's a home run, very similar to the Darryl home run in the NLCS that we included that helped cut into that rally. That was number 8 on the list, Game 3 of the 86 NLCS. It's a home run that didn't tie the game, didn't give him the lead, but certainly cut into it. And obviously, Don Clendenin went on and won the World Series MVP. Here's one from our time that he believes I.O. missed. And it's technically a regular season home run, even though I don't know if it really is, because it's Game 163. It was the playoff game in 1999 against the Cincinnati Reds. Obviously, it counts as a regular season game. All the regular season numbers count, but it's a playoff game. It's a win and you're in kind of game. That's why when we talked about Lindor hitting a home run in Game 161 and how rare it has been in the history of the New York Mets to play games at the end of seasons that count. Like, think about it. We remember all of them, but they're few and far between where you're playing Game 161 and 162 and they matter. Think about the list of games where that's occurred, or a list of seasons where that's occurred. Obviously, it happened in 1999. They win that Sunday game against Pittsburgh and they force a one-game playoff against the Cincinnati Reds. And immediately they set the tone when Edgardo Alfonso came to the plate against Steve Paris and did this.
With the leg problems he's had, we'll see. Center field, going back on the ball is Hammonds. Still going back. Back to the wall, it's gone! And that one seemed to surprise Hammonds. He started to break back easily on it, thinking he had a play. But he did not. It was over the 404-foot marker. And the Mets have jumped ahead of Paris 2-0 after only 2 batters.
I think it's an interesting one, and it's a big home run. But when I think back to that game, I think back to Al Leiter's dominance, and I think back to, the Mets were going to win that game. And I didn't feel the drama even in that first inning. Like, it felt good when Edgardo Alfonso hit that home run, and it certainly relaxed us. But I think knowing the result and knowing they won 6-0 and knowing Al Leiter was in complete control, it's a big home run. I don't know if I would put that in my top 20. And that's one that I have firsthand memories of. Obviously, the other ones, like Yanni, you do research on and you try to put yourself into the context of what happened. But I think in this case, like, it's an honorable mention. But to me, it doesn't make the top 20. The other 3 he included, I think, are honorable mentions. I don't think they would make the top 20. They're regular season home runs. One is from 1973, Game 160. Remember, the Mets only played 161 that year because they didn't need the 162nd game. It was actually very similar to what happened this year. They played a doubleheader against the Chicago Cubs, where all they needed was 1 win. They won the first game of the doubleheader. They clinched the playoffs. The day before that, Cleon Jones had a home run off Fergie Jenkins. And the reason and maybe not being there and not experiencing it is why I could not even put this in my top 20, is that they were winning the game 3-2. And Cleon hit a home run that helped break open the game. And then they ended up kind of running away with it. So, yeah, it's important. But I guess I would argue, where would you include Brandon Nimmo's home run from Game 162 or Game 161 this season? Like, and I think that one was probably more important than the Cleon Jones was, right? You forget about it because they blew the lead and then Lindor was forced to do it. This is an insurance home run. Now, we included the Darryl insurance home run, but that's Game 7 of the World Series. So this one I disagree with. I also included Ron Swoboda with the Mets up 2.5 games over Chicago at this point, hitting a tie-breaking grand slam in the 8th inning on September 13th, 1969. Again, like, I think if I experienced it, this is where I'll totally admit that there's a bias in just doing research and experiencing it. Maybe I'd feel different if I'm sitting there at Shea Stadium that night and I'm feeling the tension of, well, we're only up by 2.5 games. We really need this one. I don't know. It's a good idea, and it's a good kind of research to find, but I don't think I'd put that in my top 20. And the last one he came up with is 1973, September 22nd. Wayne Garrett hits a home run. Mets have gone 19-7 to storm into first place, and Wayne Garrett hits the home run that scores the only 2 runs in the whole game in that game, September 22nd, that helps them win the game and win a division title. So great job by Yanni. I thought he did a wonderful job. I really did. I think that those 3 home runs, the Gary Carter one in game 4, the Staub home run in game 4 of 73, and the Clendenin one in game 5 of 69, certainly give me thought. And I think if I could add it, like the one home run I'd probably take out is the Asdrubal Cabrera home run. And I think that one meant so much to me personally as a father. That probably hiked it up way too much. But it was an awesome regular season home run. It really was. I think the difference is in 69 and 73, they went on and had great success. In 73, they got to the World Series. In 69, they won the World Series. In 2016, we made the playoff for 35 seconds. I don't like eliminating that. I don't like just not including great regular season moments because that was a fun pennant race. And I think as I get older, like 2022, I'm not sure what we're going to think of as time goes by, but as time has gone by, I've appreciated 2016. When it first happened and I was on the air with Joe, I would basically say it wasn't a real playoff. Like, screw that. But I think as time has gone by and you realize how unique it is to make the playoffs, I think back to that pennant race with more fondness than maybe I had in the moment. But either way, great job. Appreciate the email. Now, this is a really interesting one that I got a lot of feedback on, including one from John Wertheimer, one from Robert Gottlieb, one from a guy named Mark from Astoria, all saying the Steve Henderson game. So I see this, and I'm like, what the hell is this, Steve? Even I don't remember the Steve Henderson game. Well, remember, I wasn't born, but I wasn't familiar with the Steve Henderson game. Well, the Steve Henderson game occurred in 1980. 1980 was not a great season for the New York Mets. So it's not like we went to a season, because naturally when you're doing research, or when I was doing research on this whole thing, you go back to 1969, you go back to 1973, you go back to years where they had success, and you're like, all right, where are the home runs I may have missed? The 1980 Mets, managed by Joe Torre, went 67-95, right? So, number one, they did not have a very good season. Let's start with that. Number two, when I hear the name Steve Henderson, and Steve Henderson is a famous name in the history of the New York Mets, but it's not for a good reason. It's that he was traded for Tom Seaver. Like, I know about Doug Flynn and Dan Norman and Pat Zachary because they were traded for Tom Seaver. And that's the trade that made my dad cry and made Beningo cry. So, not that Steve Henderson sucked, because you look at his career numbers and it's not like he was some kind of bum. You know, he had a serviceable major league career, I guess. I'll pull up his numbers and at least show you evidence of that. Career 280 hitter, career 765 OPS. In his first year with the Mets in 1977, 297. 12 home runs, 65 RBIs, finished second in Rookie of the Year voting. Like, cool. But he was traded for Tom Seaver. And that's a tough pill to swallow. So I go back and say, all right, what the hell is the Steve Henderson game? I'll set it up for you, and I'll tell you where it is similar to one of the games I used in honorable mention. Remember, I played a game, for those that saw or listened to the episode, of Carl Everett hitting this shocking grand slam against the Montreal Expos in 1997. I actually included that game in my book, My Mets Bible, because it was such an incredible, shocking comeback. Shea Stadium was rocking, and I thought, wow, this season could be special. They came down, back from a deficit of like 6-0 in the ninth inning. Well, this Steve Henderson game is very similar. It was June 14th, 1980. Mets are 26-28, so they're not very good, but they're not buried quite yet. They're down 6-0 after 5. They're down 6-1 after 8, and it's 6-2 going into the ninth inning. And they are down to their final out, and Steve Henderson comes to the plate. I want you to hear this. I want you to hear the call. I want you to listen to Bob Murphy, hear the crowd reaction, because I think listening to this actually taught me about the Steve Henderson call besides the information I just gave you. So, out of the request of many of some of our old-time listeners, here it is, the Steve Henderson game and the Steve Henderson walk-off.
And the pitch. And a high fly to right field. It's fairly deep. Going back, it may go. Home run! The Mets have won the ball game.
Listen to the crowd. And it's funny, Bob Murphy goes on for about 5 minutes explaining that people would not leave. And so this isn't one of those, hey, a guy wrote me and told me and claims, hey, about 50 years ago in 1980, it's not 50 years ago, it's 45 years ago, but my math can be off. 45 years ago in 1980, when Henderson had that home run, Shea Stadium rocked and people didn't leave. We would hear that and say, oh, really? Did that happen? But Bob Murphy goes on to explain, nobody is leaving. The place is going crazy. It's like a party. And so what that taught me listening to the kind of latter part of it was that in that moment in 1980, that was incredible. So I think for those who were growing up in 1980, if I was around in 1980, that home run, even in a lost season, would resonate as the thing you remember from that 1980 season. So I am glad that people reached out and suggested it, because lost seasons aren't just completely lost. Like, if you experienced it, there are going to be certain things you remember. Like, I'll give you one that I regretted not including as an honorable mention, because I feel good about the top 20 list. I do definitely agree that some of those 86 memories and 69 memories we recently played, I probably could have pushed in there, maybe one or two. But for the most part, I feel okay and I feel comfortable about the top 20. But there are a lot of honorable mentions that could have gone on for weeks. We could have played, 30 or 40. Just, hey, I'm not putting this in the top 20, but this was awesome. And there's a few that I kind of remember fondly because the season was so freaking bad that you need some positives to come out of it. So for the fans in 1980, Steve Henderson is one of them. For me, one of them is Omir Santos. 2009 was such a bad year, and it featured so many bad moments. I think of 2009, and I think of the Ryan Church game in Los Angeles. I think of Luis Castillo dropping a pop-up against the Yankees. Those are two things that right off the top, you won't forget. There are some painful, painful losses. But the Omir Santos game at Fenway Park was unbelievable. He hits the home run. We're not sure if it's out. Jonathan Papelbon's losing his mind. And then the Mets hold on and win the game. I also remember that part, J.J. Putz holding on and winning it. So there are a lot of moments, even in bad seasons, that while they shouldn't pass Gary Carter hitting a home run or Lenny Dykstra hitting a home run or any of those other memories we have, you don't want to forget about the good ones, even in bad years. Now, I ask you a question. Pete and I talked about this briefly off air, but I bring it up to everybody on the Rico. I thought this was fun. I thought this was cathartic, listening to great home runs, debating which home run should be there. And it got us thinking, do the Rico Brogna listeners want, maybe not right away, maybe not even this offseason, maybe it's something for next offseason, would you want a top 20 home run list against the New York Mets? Like the top 20 worst home runs hit against the New York Mets? The Mike Scioscia home run? I'm laughing, I shouldn't. The Yadi Molina home run? Derek Jeter with the light bulbs going off in game one? Is that something we would want? Is that something you would listen to? is that something that we would have good-natured fights about? Like, nah, that one hurt me more, or that one hurt me more. Or should we keep it to just the positivity? What do you think, Pete? Like, do you think that we should do that at some point?
I think we should do that. When we were talking about it earlier today, I was like, this is brilliant. I already think I know what number one's going to be eventually. But yeah, like there's instantaneously, like there's just home runs that killed the mood, killed the vibe of me as a Mets fan in so many different ways. I'm curious to hear your list of top 20 awful home runs in Mets history.
Yeah, I mean, that could be fun. So what we will ask is you, the listener, is that something you want to hear on a future Rico Brogna? You can email us, thericob@gmail.com. I can't wait to do that if we do that, and then read the angry emails of how the hell you putting Socha there? It's got to be here, or this and that. So it's definitely something to consider down the road. But this was certainly a lot of fun. We appreciate the feedback and the different arguments and all the different ideas on what truly is the greatest home runs in the history of the New York Mets. Thank you very much for listening, for downloading, and subscribing. Remember, you are guaranteed a brand new Rico Brogna every Wednesday night into Thursday, every Sunday night into Monday. But we like to pop in a lot of extras as the offseason continues to roll on. Thank you. We appreciate it for listening to Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.